One Saturday afternoon, not long after getting married, I went to a bookstore to see if they had a book that I had been trying to get a hold of. While I was there, I ran into a friend of my wife's that worked there. While I was talking with her, I couldn't help but notice that she was looking at me in kind of a strange way. She was wincing and scrunching up her face and at times possibly even giggling. I didn't think anything of it until I returned back to my car and I checked the rearview mirror. That's when I realized that my wife had intentionally failed to mention something to me before I left the house. You see, for lunch we had spaghetti, and after eating, I had a ring of reddish orangey sauce around my mouth. Embarrassed, I shamefully drove home. I walked in the door to my wife bent over laughing, trying to breathe. To this day, if you ask her about this moment, she will still giggle. It was in this moment that I realized that I had not married a humble and compassionate woman, oh no, but instead I had married a woman with a twisted sense of humor that was willing to do anything for a laugh at her husband's expense. And I love her all the more for it. I thought that I had married the perfect woman. She would say that she is, but I would say whatever she tells me to say. But it doesn't take long before a couple to be married before each other comes to the conclusion that each person in that marriage is anything but perfect. But that's not only true with marriages. It's true with forgetful parents and unsteady friendships, weird classmates, misspelling baristas, and sociopath siblings. But our imperfection actually goes deeper than those things, doesn't it? There's a kind of imperfection that each of us have that we know is just out of bounds. The kind that bends the truth, the kind that betrays trust, the kind of imperfection that breaks our connection with God and with other people. This kind of imperfection actually has a name. We call it sin. Many of us have different reactions when we hear that word. It can sound foreign, it can sound accusing, it can bring up feelings of guilt and regret. But what about God? What is God's reaction when it comes to sin? For the longest time, a story about Jesus was passed around, which eventually found its place in the book of John, chapter 8. At dawn, Jesus went to the temple courts. It was very common at that time for rabbis, who were teachers and experts in scripture, to teach. They would teach in an area of the temple, and they would stand by a wall which would act kind of like a microphone, amplifying the sound, and that's where they could speak to the most people. And while Jesus is teaching, there begins to be a commotion stirring in the back. A woman is being pushed towards the front by a crowd of religious experts. They make the woman stand in front of everyone else, and they talk to Jesus. But they shout so that everyone can hear. This woman has been caught in the act of adultery, they say. In other words, she is caught sleeping with a man that wasn't her husband. Now, these religious leaders, they could have gone to Jesus privately. They could have pulled him quietly off to the side. But instead, they choose to embarrass this woman. They could care less about her. Instead, they're using her to try and trap Jesus. So they shout out in front of everyone, "This woman has been caught in the act of adultery." The law commands us to stone such a woman, Jesus. What do you say? By asking Jesus this question, they're trying to catch Jesus off guard, make him look like a fool, and lose credibility with everyone. It kind of looks like a lose-lose situation for Jesus. If on one hand, Jesus says to stone her, to everyone, he looks merciless and unforgiving. All that teaching about loving one another doesn't mean a thing. On the other hand, if Jesus says let her go, it would then look like Jesus has no respect for the law, which was the Bible that they had at the time, and no good Jew would follow someone that disregarded the law. The situation appears to be a catch-22. And if you put yourself in the place of the woman, what do you think she's thinking? Yeah, she's probably thinking that Jesus is a rabbi and an expert teacher of the law. And of course he's going to choose the law and say that she should be stoned. If I were her, I'd probably be thinking that this is it. She's probably thinking that she's going to die a painful and brutal death. But Jesus does something that is so like him. He chooses to do something that no one sees coming. He kneels down and he begins to write in the dirt with his finger. The dirt that covers the floor of the temple, he now makes a masterpiece. The Bible doesn't say what Jesus writes. Some Bible experts think that he writes Jeremiah 17, which says, "Lord, you are the hope of Israel. All who forsake you will be put to shame. Those who turn away from you will be written in the dust because they have forsaken the Lord, the spring of living water." He could have written those verses, but no one knows for sure. While Jesus writes, the religious leaders keep bantering on. At one point, Jesus stands up and says, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." He then stoops back down and continues to write. And then, one by one, starting with the oldest people in the crowd first, they begin to leave until the only two people left are Jesus and the woman. A temple that was once bustling with people is now empty and silent. The distraught woman looks up at Jesus, uncertain of what will happen next. Jesus, though, straightens up and looks at the woman and says, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" The woman replies, "No, no one." Jesus then looks at the woman in the eyes and says, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go and leave your life of sin." This true story leaves us with a lot of questions. Where was the man that was also caught in adultery? What did Jesus actually write? But the question that Jesus really leaves us with has to do with the instructions that he gives to the woman. Go and leave your life of sin. So what does it look like to leave a life of sin? After all, we've all done wrong things. So what does that mean? It could mean that we need to follow the law that the religious leaders accused the woman of not following in the first place. It could mean, hey, do your best not to make mistakes. You got a big second chance here. Don't blow it. It could mean to live a pure life. Did you know that food has purity standards? The government has standards as to what is considered pure enough food for people to eat and what is not pure enough for people to eat. Here is a list of foods. Let's see what is acceptable by the FDA. You're pure food experts and the guardians of what you eat. Let's start with canned mushrooms. How many maggots are allowed per 100 grams? Just a reminder, 100 grams is like 100 paper clips. Let's see the answer. Yeah, it's 20. 20 maggots. Disgusting. All right, let's move on to something a little bit more tasty, because who eats canned mushrooms? How about cinnamon? How many insect parts per 100 grams? I mean, think about your Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Sorry if I ruin it, but the answer is 400 insect parts per 100 grams. That is 4 times the amount of cinnamon. All right, let's try frozen berries. What percentage of frozen berries in a package could be moldy? You ready for it? 60%. Over half the bag can be moldy. Okay. And pizza sauce. I mean, who doesn't love pizza? Whether it's Papa John's or DiGiorno or your favorite pizza joint. How many fly eggs are acceptable per 100 grams? You ready? Pizza sauce can include 30 or more fly eggs per 100 grams. But wait, there's more. Alternatively, you can have 15 or more fly eggs and 1 or more maggots or 2 or more maggots, but not all of the above at once. So what's the point of all that? Other than getting a little squirmy the next time that you hit up Smoothie King. The point is, standards matter. None of us would say that any of those items are 100% pure, right? Are you with me? This isn't a trick question, guys. Insect legs and cinnamon is just gross. Standards matter. So what are God's standards? Maybe somewhere God has a line. You either meet his standards or you don't. Good enough or not good enough. You're either in or you're out. Many of us think this way. We ask ourselves, what do we have to do to be on this side of the line? We might think that if you're on this side of the line, then you're good. On this side of the line, you and God are on great terms. Best buds, amigos, compadres. But then on the opposite end of things, some of us think that if we're on this side of the line, well, then we're toast. So the question really is, how good is good enough? Many of us actually start doing the math. Maybe you had a good week and you told the truth and you read your Bible and you went to church and wow, would you look at that? You actually prayed a few times. Bravo, good for you. But then the following week, you stub your toe and you say a few choice, colorful words. You and a friend share some answers on a school project that you know you were supposed to have done alone. Maybe you watch a video online that you know you shouldn't have been watching. And for many of us, it can be easy to believe that God is up in heaven with a galactic clipboard keeping score, and then someday when you die, when the score is tallied up, if you've done more good things than bad things, then congratulations, you've made it into heaven, right? Yeah, that's not how God works. Jesus actually comes along and says, no, that's not at all how the universe works. Really, it all boils down to what you do with Jesus. You can choose to be with him or not be with him. You can choose to keep to yourself. But if you're with Jesus, there's forgiveness and acceptance. He accepts you despite your faults and failures and anything that you've done or anything that you'll ever do. You will never be perfect, but that's okay because Jesus is enough. Can I level with you? There is no being good enough. There's only Jesus being good enough. Enough to forgive, enough to make wrong things right, enough to heal, enough to forever change your life. The book of Titus puts it like this. He saved us, not because of the righteous things we've done, but because of his mercy, that while we were still sinners, Christ, that is Jesus, he died for us. So what do we do with this? Well, for one, we get to change our thinking. There's no more trying to figure out if you're good enough. There's only deciding whether you are with Jesus and you want to live his way, or you want to keep to yourself and live your way. Second, if you choose to be with Jesus and God isn't keeping score, well, then neither should you. Nobody's perfect. Now, does this mean that we have a free pass to do whatever we want and God won't care what we do? No. There's such thing as living a life that is honoring to God out of our love for him. But if God isn't keeping score of all the wrong things or the great things that we've done, then we don't get to keep score either. Or keep score of others. Now, is thinking this way hard? Yeah, you betcha. It's difficult for me to always remember, but there is a kind of freedom that you experience like no other when you say, yes, I'm with Jesus, and he has taken care of me, and he's taken care of my past and my future. At Crosspoint Students, we say nobody's perfect, and we say no to keeping score, and we say out of the love that we have for Jesus that we will be honest about the junk in our lives and our struggles and our disappointments and our failures. And despite all of those things, we say yes to becoming the person that Jesus wants us to become. So what does it look like? What does living that way look like? Well, here's an example. There's this real strange thing that happens every time I fly on a plane. Doesn't matter if it's a long flight, like Seattle to St. Louis, or a short flight, like San Francisco to LA. It doesn't happen right at first, but it definitely happens after they come through with the snack and the little beverage carts. It never fails, but I always spill something on myself. Now, maybe it's the plane hitting a bump in the air as I'm about to take a drink, or my elbow smacking into the front tray, or Maybe the lid to my pre-service Starbucks comes off. It never fails that I leave the flight way messier than how I began the flight. But getting a little wet isn't the worst part. The worst part is now having to walk around all day in a stained shirt, and everyone at the airport and the Uber driver and the people at the hotel all know exactly what happened. There is no hiding it. It's out there for everyone to see. I spilled stuff all over myself. So whether it's a spaghetti stain or a coffee stain or stuff that we have going on in our lives, life is just messy and nobody's perfect. That's why we have small groups. We design small groups to be a place where you can be yourself and others get to know you, and we share our messy life stains with one another. And now we don't have to be afraid of what someone will think, and we don't have to worry about someone telling others about your stains. We will just be our messy selves as we figure out together what it means to find and follow Jesus. So in a few minutes, we're going to do something pretty uncommon in this world of ours. We're going to jump into our not so perfect, messy, showing our stains small groups. These are safe places for you to grow as a person, for you to belong and to get cheered on by other imperfect people. Because when nobody's perfect, everyone's welcome.